I'll take you to court, you ungrateful brat. My mother's words sliced through the air like a dagger, each syllable dripping with anger and disbelief. I stood there, stunned, grappling with the reality of her threat. Why was she resorting to something so extreme? What had pushed her to the brink of suing her own son? To understand this tumultuous moment, let me take you back and explain how it all unfolded. My name is Adrian, and I'm 30 years old, currently serving as the chief financial officer for a furniture manufacturing company in sunny California. Life has settled into a quiet rhythm as I live with my father, James, in a modest house on the outskirts of Riverside, a peaceful city just an hour's drive from the bustling streets of Los Angeles. Every morning, before the sun fully rises, my dad awakens earlier than I do. He brews a pot of coffee and immerses himself in the day's news, while I stumble out to the front porch, still half asleep. We share a silent ritual, sipping our coffee and soaking in the tranquility of the morning. It's a fleeting moment of calm before the day's demands pull us apart. When evening falls and I return home, the air is always filled with the mouthwatering aromas of dinner wafting from the kitchen. My father, a talented cook and former head chef at a prestigious three-star restaurant in Santa Monica, pours his heart into every meal he prepares. I once asked him why he continued to cook with such passion even after retiring. He looked at me with a gentle smile and replied, "Cooking brings me peace. Every dish is a way for me to show love." His words warmed my heart, reminding me that amid the chaos of life, we still find solace in the simplest acts of care. Right now, it's just the two of us, navigating life together, cherishing each other's company amidst the shadows of a fractured family. We've created a haven where love thrives, yet the echoes of the past loom large, waiting to unravel the delicate fabric of our lives. But I feel more at peace and content than ever. There used to be four of us in the family besides my dad, my mom, Stella, and my older brother, Hudson. But 2 years ago, we cut all family ties. To me now, they're just strangers who happen to share my DNA. My story took place 2 years ago, in July 2023. Back then, I hadn't yet been promoted to chief financial officer. I was just a head accountant with a modest salary. One weekend afternoon that July, I was driving home for dinner after my mom had invited me earlier that morning. My place was about a 20-minute drive from my parents' house, so we still saw each other now and then on weekends, though not all that often. Around 6 p.m., as I pulled up to the front gate, I spotted a silver Honda Civic parked outside. It was my brother Hudson's car. When I saw that familiar car, I realized Mom had invited his whole family over without telling me. When I entered the house, he was sitting on the old brown leather sofa, wholly absorbed in his phone. His two kids, Jose and Peter, were playing with Lego blocks on the rug, their laughter echoing through the living room. When he noticed me walk in, Hudson gave a half-hearted wave, more like the kind you'd give an acquaintance on the street. Not a single word of greeting came out of his mouth. His eyes stayed glued to his screen, as if I were passing through like background noise. Hudson is my older brother, 2 years ahead of me. In our family, he was always Mom's golden child, the one who got all the affection, all the second chances. He was the favored one. After an 8-year marriage to Camilla, they divorced in 2022. When their split became public, Hudson painted himself as the abandoned husband. He'd tell friends Camilla was selfish. She only thought about herself. I worked so hard to support the family, and all I wanted was to come home and relax, but she kept demanding more. But I knew the truth was the exact opposite. Hudson was controlling and lazy, and he believed his wife should serve him like a maid. He could spend an entire day watching TV while Camilla went to work, cared for the kids, cooked and cleaned. Anytime she asked him to pitch in, he'd snap, "I'm making money, housework is your job." Camilla put up with it for 8 years, but eventually she'd had enough. She realized she was living like a single mom even though she still had a husband, and the marriage finally fell apart. After the divorce, they agreed to raise one child. Hudson cared for Jose, and Camilla kept Peter. On weekends, they'd arrange for the boys to spend time together so the brothers could stay close. After giving Hudson a cold nod, I headed straight to the kitchen to greet my parents. Dad was standing by the counter, helping Mom chop vegetables, his face as gentle as always. Without hesitation, I rolled up my sleeves and joined them in prepping dinner. I handed Dad a bottle of red wine I'd picked up on the way, and he took it, examining the label closely before giving me a warm smile and saying, "Thanks for remembering what I like." Hearing that sincere compliment from him warmed my heart. At least someone in this family still saw me and still valued me. My dad, James, has always been the man who quietly endures my mom's temperament. He's gentle, soft-spoken, and prefers peace over confrontation. Whenever my mom decided for the family, he would nod in agreement, even though sometimes I could see a hint of disagreement in his eyes. Once I asked him why he never stood up to her. He smiled and said, in marriage, sometimes you have to choose your battles. Your mom has a strong personality. I understand that. As long as she's happy, that's enough for me. My mom, Stella, is the kind of woman who likes to have the final say in everything. Whether it was a big decision like buying a house or picking schools for us, or something small like what to cook for dinner, she wanted to be in control. She's not bad, but she has a strong need to manage everything and firmly believes her way is right. Whenever Hudson had a problem, she'd jump in to help without asking anyone. And whenever I voiced a different opinion, she'd say, "I've lived longer than you. I know what's best for this family." There were times I couldn't understand why my dad was so patient with her controlling ways. But then I'd see them sitting together watching TV at night, dad making coffee for her every morning, or mom cooking his favorite dishes, and I'd think, maybe they've figured out their version of happiness. Some secrets in a marriage are only known to the people living it. In their case, maybe their love is shown through quiet, everyday gestures, not through sweet words or heated arguments. Around 7 p.m., we all sat down for dinner. The table was set thoughtfully, with delicious dishes mom and dad prepared together. The atmosphere was warm and relaxed at first, brought to life by the cheerful laughter of my two nephews. Hudson sat across from me, still occasionally scrolling through his phone, even though mom had repeatedly reminded him to put it away. Dad sat at the head of the table, quietly enjoying the bottle of wine I'd brought. Mom stayed busy serving food to Jose and Peter, constantly checking in, "Do you want more? This meat is delicious." Jose, the older one at 8, sat beside his 6-year-old brother Peter. Though they didn't live under the same roof, their bond was undeniable. Jose would gently remind Peter, "Eat your veggies," or Peter would break his bread in half to share when he saw Jose had finished his portion. When Peter accidentally spilled his drink, Jose immediately grabbed a napkin to wipe it up, saying, "It's okay, Peter, I spill stuff all the time too." They both giggled, no blame, no scolding, just kindness. Watching those two take care of each other so naturally, without being told to, filled me with a strange warmth. They shared, protected, and understood each other instinctively. In that moment, I wished my brother and I had grown up like that. When we were kids, Hudson never shared anything with me. He always took the best for himself. When there were candies, he'd eat first and eat more. When there was a new toy, he'd pick first, and only then would I get a turn. Anytime I protested, Mom would say, "Let your brother have it, he's older." I still remember when Hudson would steal my favorite spot in front of the TV. He'd throw a fit if I refused to move, and Mom would force me to give it up. Even when it came to good food, Hudson never hesitated to compete with me, never once thinking to share. Thinking back on all that still leaves a bitter taste, not because of the toys or snacks, but because I always felt like I was second in line in my family. Watching Jose and Peter, I realized that's how real brothers should treat each other. That dinner ended on a cheerful note. I genuinely enjoyed that rare warm moment with my family, even if some of me still carried the quiet sadness of an unfair childhood. After dinner, the joyful atmosphere lingered in the sound of Jose and Peter's laughter as they ran outside to play. Once we had cleared the table, Mom suggested, "Let's all sit in the living room for a bit. I have something to say." Her tone was more serious than usual, and I sensed something wasn't right. A few minutes later, we moved into the living room. Hudson, as always, had his phone glued to his hand. Dad settled into his usual armchair, and I sat near the window. Mom made coffee for everyone. After taking a sip and setting her cup down, she turned to me with a cautious look and asked, "How's work going? How much have you managed to save?" I'm unfamiliar with sharing my financial details, even with family, so I kept it vague. "I'm doing fine. The job's steady and I make enough to live on." She nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. Then, after a brief silence, she suddenly asked, "Can you lend me $400,000? I nearly spit out my coffee." I stared at her in disbelief, unsure if I'd heard right. I asked immediately, "Did you say $400,000? What do you need that kind of money for?" Without hesitation or any effort to explain gently, she said, "Hudson needs a house. Lend him the money, I'll co-sign for him." I was stunned by her bluntness. She spoke as if $400,000 was a casual favor, as if it was obvious that I should be the one to cover it. I looked at Hudson, still silent, staring at his phone like none of this involved him. Yes, I had the money. It was what I'd saved over many years of hard work and discipline. But knowing Hudson's laziness and lack of responsibility, how long would it take him to pay me back? And my mom, now retired and living off a modest pension, had no means to guarantee anything. After nearly a minute of weighing everything, I gave a direct answer. I told her, Mom, that's huge money. I can't lend it. She immediately grew irritated. Her tone hardened. Adrian, with your job and income, you can afford it. Don't be selfish. Help your brother. Hearing her call me selfish, I let out a bitter laugh and shook my head. I couldn't believe she said that so easily. When I didn't budge, she tried a different angle, now sounding like she was bargaining. If you don't want to lend the money, let Hudson live in your house. He needs a stable place. This time, I was genuinely shocked and furious. I couldn't understand how a 30-year-old grown man still needed his mother to scheme and beg on his behalf like he was a helpless child. I didn't want to argue or explain anymore. I looked at her and said firmly, there will be no $400,000, and I am not giving up my house. Realizing she could no longer manipulate me like she used to, Mom grew angry and lost her composure. Her voice rose sharply, filled with disappointment. It's truly sad to have such a selfish son in this family. That's when Hudson finally looked up from his phone and chimed in with a tone full of blame. You're heartless. You're going to let your nephews go without a stable home. I stared into his eyes and replied clearly and firmly, they're your kids. You're their father. Take responsibility. Don't pass it off on someone else. Looking at the people I once called family, people who were now trying to guilt-trip and pressure me into sacrificing for Hudson's benefit, I felt nothing but disappointment and profound sorrow. Across from me, Dad sat silently, watching the whole thing unfold without saying a word. His face showed no emotion. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked to the door. And before I left that house, I told myself that if they ever bring this up again, I will never return here. Driving home that night through the darkness, I felt overwhelmed by disappointment. Not because of the $400,000, but because of the way my mother mistreated me compared to Hudson. What could be more heartbreaking than realizing the mother you love sees you as nothing more than an ATM, ready to dispense cash for Hudson whenever needed? But what cut deepest was Dad's silence. He sat through the entire argument without saying a word. He didn't defend me. He didn't step in when Mom and Hudson ganged up on me. Maybe he's been avoiding conflict for so long that he's lost the courage to stand up for what's right. Suddenly, memories from childhood came flooding back, like an old movie playing in my mind. Hudson was always favored. Charming, smooth-talking, able to win over adults with a smile and a compliment. On the other hand, I was the blunt one, too honest to flatter. Relatives and neighbors always say, Hudson is so smart, such a great talker. He'll go far. When it came to me, they'd say, Adrian's too quiet. He should learn to speak up like his brother. That favoritism never went away. When Hudson was in college, Mom sent him money regularly. When it was my turn, she said, you can handle it. I believe in you. It sounded like trust, but it was just a way not to have to help. Even after Hudson married, Mom kept sending him money, small amounts of $500 or $1,000 each month, supposedly for the grandkids. Meanwhile, I never received any financial help from her. But I'm not the selfish one they make me out to be. I've always been there for Jose and Peter, buying them gifts on birthdays, Christmas, or just because I saw something they'd like. After Hudson's divorce from Camilla, I even gave him $3,000 to help him rent an apartment and get back on his feet. I never asked for that money back. I considered it a gesture of support from one brother to another. But clearly, that was never enough for them. Everything I did was taken for granted. And once given, they just expected more. I was disappointed they didn't know when to stop. They didn't understand that love and support have limits, that always relying on someone else doesn't help Hudson grow. It only stunts him. They were trying to make me responsible for his life while he put in zero effort himself. That night, I came home heavy-hearted, questioning whether I wanted to keep a relationship with a family like this anymore. In the days following that tense conversation, my mom and I didn't speak. I assumed she was still angry with me, but I had no intention of calling or apologizing. Instead, I threw myself into work, trying to push the whole situation out of my mind. Work became my refuge. I started getting to the office earlier, staying later, burying myself in numbers and financial reports. At least there, everything made sense. Everything was transparent. No one asked me for anything unreasonable. About 2 weeks later, my dad called on a Monday morning as I was getting ready for work. The moment I picked up, his tone was somber. "Adrian, I need to tell you something. Your mom and Hudson went ahead and bought the house. Your mom used $100,000 from her savings for the down payment, and the remaining $300,000 is listed under you for financing. Be careful." Hearing that, I felt a surge of confusion and anger. They'd gone through with it, bought a house they couldn't afford, and somehow put my name on the hook. But alongside the fury, I also felt something unexpected. Warmth. For once, Dad had stepped up and warned me. After the silence, I asked hesitantly, "Why are you telling me this? Aren't you afraid Mom will be upset?" His response was short, but there was something in his voice I hadn't heard before, a mix of weariness and quiet resolve. "I don't want to see you being mistreated anymore." That sentence hit me like a sudden light piercing through a long, dark tunnel. For the first time, I realized Dad had been watching all along. It wasn't that he didn't see the injustice or that he didn't care. He chose silence because he thought it would keep the peace and the family intact. Maybe he believed that stepping in would only make things worse. Perhaps he'd witnessed my struggles and felt powerless to intervene. But now, things had gone too far, and he couldn't stay quiet anymore. And I didn't feel utterly alone in this family for the first time since birth. Just like Dad had warned, I saw him, Mom, and Hudson standing outside my gate that afternoon after I got home from work. They had Jose and Peter with them, the kids standing quietly at their sides. Seeing the whole family show up unannounced like that instantly irritated me. But not wanting to cause a scene in front of the neighbors, I reluctantly opened the door and invited them in, already bracing myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. Mom jumped right into it. No sooner had we sat in the living room. In a tone that was way too casual, she said, "Adrian Hudson and I just bought a house. It's worth $400,000. We paid $100,000 up front. The remaining $300,000 will be paid in installments." I kept my composure and politely replied, "Congratulations on the new house, Mom." "Hudson," I tried to stay civil. A few seconds later, Mom handed me a thick stack of documents. With a calm voice, she said, "Right now, Hudson is unemployed and I only have my pension. You need to sign here and cover the first year of payments. After that, Hudson will take over. He'll pay you back every cent." Listening to her, I couldn't help but find it almost laughable. The way they tried to trap me with this so-called favor, wrapped in family ties and guilt over the kids. With my background in finance, I knew precisely what signing that agreement meant. It would make me legally responsible for the full loan. And when Hudson inevitably defaulted, something I found all too likely, it would fall squarely on me. After a brief pause, I gave a firm answer. "I'm not signing." Immediately, Mom raised her voice, clearly disappointed. "Don't be so selfish. Can't you see the kids don't have a proper home? You're okay with letting them stay in some rental? I'm truly disappointed in you." Right on cue, Jose and Peter chimed in, clearly prepped for this moment. Jose pleaded, "Uncle Adrian, please help us. We want a home to live in." Peter hugged me tightly and sobbed, "Please help my dad. I don't want to live in a rented place anymore." Seeing that broke my heart, not because of their words, but because I knew exactly who had coached them. Mom and Hudson had turned those innocent kids into tools to manipulate me. I didn't want to argue anymore. I sat down, looked them both in the eyes, and asked, "Tell me the truth. Who told you to say those things?" The boys looked at each other, confused, then turned toward my mom as if waiting for her signal. Peter mumbled softly, "Grandma told us. She said if we didn't, she wouldn't love us anymore." At that moment, I felt my blood boil. They had crossed a line using innocent children like that. I looked straight at them, pointed toward the door and said coldly, "Leave my house now or I'm calling 911. Seeing I wasn't bluffing, they quietly got up to leave. Just before stepping out the door, Mom turned around and threatened, "I'll sue you, you ungrateful bastard." I replied calmly, "That's your choice." And honestly, I had no idea what she thought she could sue me for. I owed her nothing. I figured she was lashing out in anger. As they walked out, Dad lingered behind. He placed a hand gently on my shoulder. That small, warm gesture helped steady me after everything that had just happened. I thought Mom had just been lashing out in anger, that her threat to sue me was nothing more than emotional blackmail. But I was wrong. A week after that confrontation at my house, I received a notice from the court informing me that I was being sued in a civil case. I couldn't believe my eyes when I opened the envelope and read the contents. In the complaint, My mother demanded $200,000 from me, claiming it was the amount she had spent covering my college education, tuition and living expenses over 4 years. She stated the money had been given to me in cash, which is why there were no bank records to support the claim. However, she claimed to have a witness who could testify that I accepted the money. Staring at that notice, I felt an overwhelming wave of bitterness. The woman who gave birth to me was now willing to fabricate a story, fake evidence, and drag me to court, all in service of helping Hudson. I immediately called her. She picked up after 2 rings. I didn't bother with greetings. I went straight to the point. My voice sharp with anger. "You're suing me over something that never happened, just for the sake of your golden son?" She didn't answer the question. Instead, her voice took on a tone like she was making a deal. "If you agree to sign and take over the mortgage payments for Hudson, I'll withdraw the lawsuit." Hearing that, I lost it. I shouted into the phone, "Fine, I'll see you in court," then I hung up. In that moment, I was still in shock. But more than anything, I was resolute. I was ready to face her in court. After receiving the court summons, I decided to represent myself. Honestly, I knew from the start that this lawsuit was a waste of her time and money because there was no way it would end the way she wanted. I've worked in finance for years and studied business law and financial regulations. I know how these kinds of cases work. If there's no clear, verifiable evidence, like bank transfers, signed loan agreements, or at the very least written confirmation through text or email, a judge will rule against the plaintiff. And to be clear, I never borrowed a single cent from my mother during college. During those 4 years, I was completely financially independent. From the moment I turned 18, I applied for federal student loans. The loans were enough to cover my tuition and part of my living expenses. I earned the rest by working part-time at the campus library during nights and weekends. I remember those long nights, juggling work and study, living in a cramped dorm room with 2 roommates. Most of my meals consisted of instant noodles or basic sandwiches. During tough months, I sold back used textbooks to afford new ones for the next semester. I built my life on hard work and self-reliance, and because of that, I had nothing to fear. 2 months later, the civil trial took place. Walking into the courtroom, I saw my immediate family and a few extended relatives, familiar faces I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Diane, Mom's sister, always called Hudson the perfect nephew. Uncle Robert and Aunt Mary were also there, and they never missed a chance to praise Hudson's intelligence and charm at every family gathering. They all sat with cold expressions, eyes filled with disdain and disappointment, as if I were the traitor in the family. I could feel their judgmental stares. In their eyes, I was the ungrateful son, the selfish brother who refused to help in a time of need. They whispered among themselves and shook their heads whenever they glanced my way. Sitting alone in that courtroom, I felt lonely but wasn't afraid. Deep down, I knew I was standing on the side of the truth. Once the judge gave the go-ahead, my mother stood and confidently testified that between 2013 and 2016, she had given me $50,000 in cash 4 separate times, up to $200,000. She claimed she had a witness to support her story. That witness was none other than Hudson. After taking his oath, Hudson began testifying with a straight face. I saw my mother give Adrian $50,000 in cash on 4 occasions: August of 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016. She handed him the money every time a new school year began, and Adrian promised to pay it back after graduation. Hearing Hudson lie so smoothly, so shamelessly, made my chest tight. This was the identical brother I once cared for deeply, the one I had helped without hesitation, and now he was fabricating a story in court to bring me down. I felt rage and heartbreak watching the people I once loved the most swear false testimony to protect Hudson's interests. Mom's lawyer, a middle-aged man with thick glasses, began grilling me with loaded questions. "Can you prove you didn't receive the money? Why don't you have evidence showing you didn't borrow it?" Under pressure, I turned to the judge and said, "Your Honor, I object to the line of questioning. These questions are based on claims with no evidence. I asked my mother to present proof that I borrowed $200,000. Additionally, Hudson is her son, so his testimony in a case where his mother is the plaintiff should not be considered impartial." The judge nodded in agreement and directed my mother's legal team to provide further evidence. The trial continued for nearly an hour, filled with tense back-and-forth arguments and endless debate. As the judge tried to make sense of the conflicting testimonies, the atmosphere in the courtroom reached a boiling point. I remained firm in demanding concrete evidence, while Mom's lawyer asked me difficult questions. Then, out of nowhere, Dad stood up from the audience bench. His voice trembled, but steel was in it as he said, "Enough. Stop this." Everyone in the courtroom turned to look at him. When the judge asked if he wished to testify, Dad nodded. He stepped up to the witness stand, took the oath, then turned to face Mom and Hudson with an expression full of disappointment. From his very first words, I was stunned. He said, "I can't sit here and watch my son lie under oath anymore. Hudson and my wife have conspired in this case." Mom's face turned pale. She jumped to her feet and shouted, "James, what are you saying?" Hudson looked panicked, trying to stop Dad from going on. The judge banged the gavel and ordered silence, then returned to Dad, asking him to proceed. Dad didn't hesitate. He laid everything bare. He told the court about the house Mom bought for Hudson despite not having the means to pay for it, and how they tried to pressure me into taking on the mortgage. He stated that there was never any $200,000, and that I had been financially independent since I was 18. By then, murmurs had begun among Mom's side of the family. Confusion and doubt spread among them, shaken by the sudden turn. Mom accused Dad of lying, and Hudson claimed Dad was too old to remember things clearly. But the judge had heard enough. He struck the gavel firmly and called the courtroom to order. And me, I sat there, heart pounding. For the first time in my life, Dad had stood up and defended me in front of the whole family. After Dad's testimony, the judge struck the gavel and announced a 30-minute recess for deliberation with the review panel. The courtroom fell into an uneasy silence, broken only by faint murmurs from relatives seated in the back. Watching everything that had just unfolded, I knew the outcome was clear. Dad's testimony had laid the truth bare, and there was no longer any doubt about who was lying. 30 minutes later, the judge returned and spoke with firm authority. After reviewing all evidence and testimonies, the court rules in favor of Mr. Adrian in this case. As soon as he said those words, I felt immense relief. But the judge wasn't done. His voice sharp and commanding, he continued, "Ms. Stella and Mr. Hudson will be responsible for all court costs. Furthermore, based on Mr. James's testimony, this civil court will refer the matter to criminal court for charges of perjury and defamation against Ms. Stella and Mr. Hudson." The moment he said that, my mother and Hudson both went pale. They likely never imagined it would go this far. Mom buried her face in her hands and began to cry, while Hudson just sat frozen, hollow-eyed and silent. I didn't feel triumph or satisfaction. What I felt was justice. But beneath that, a deep sadness, because I knew at that point my family was truly irreparably broken. As I stepped out of the courtroom, my mother's side of the family looked at me with nothing but hatred and resentment. Their contempt was no longer hidden. Aunt Laura, my mother's younger sister, blocked my path and snapped, "Are you happy now? Your mom and brother are about to face jail time, all because of your selfishness." Other relatives chimed in angrily, "Adrian, you're heartless. You tore this family apart over money. You're not even human." I stopped, turned to face them and looked each one in the eye. Then I said loudly and clearly, "If you love my mother and Hudson that much, you pay for the house. As for me, I'm done with this." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Aunt Laura and the others behind, fuming but powerless to stop me. I knew from that moment on, I would be seen as the enemy in their eyes. But at least, I had finally protected myself from the toxic grip of this family. That same afternoon, while I was sitting in the living room trying to process the complex emotions from the trial, the doorbell suddenly rang. When I opened the door, I saw Dad standing with two large suitcases. His face looked exhausted and worn. I immediately invited him in, concerned about what might have happened. He sank into the sofa, clearly drained. Then he told me what had happened after the court session. The moment they got home, my mother erupted in rage. She screamed, blaming him for betraying the family and destroying Hudson and her plans. She said he had ruined everything, and that she could never forgive him for testifying against her and Hudson. In the end, she threw him out of the house and announced she would file for divorce. After telling me everything, Dad looked at me with tired eyes and asked quietly, "Can I stay here for a few days?" Hearing that broke my heart. He had sacrificed a marriage of nearly 35 years to stand up for me, to speak the truth. Without hesitation, I replied, "You can stay here as long as you want. You stood up for me today. Thank you, Dad." Then I stood up and hugged him. For the first time in a long time, I felt comfort in knowing that someone in this family truly understood me and chose to stand on the side of justice. From now on, we'd face everything together. Dad stayed with me the following days, and the house felt different. It was more alive, more peaceful, more orderly than ever before. The potted plants on the front porch were always well cared for. The kitchen sparkled spotless. The fridge stayed organized and fully stocked with fresh ingredients. Dad had always been an early riser, so the house was tidied when I woke up. Freshly brewed coffee awaited me every morning, its aroma filling the air. I told him I could make it myself, but he knew how busy I was with work, so when he made coffee for himself, he always made an extra cup for me. He'd say, "You just focus on work. I've got the little things covered." In the evenings, when I came home tired, a home-cooked meal was always waiting on the table. He prepared each with genuine care and intention, from simple dishes to more elaborate ones. 2 months later, Dad sat me down and quietly told me the divorce paperwork was finalized. After 35 years, his marriage to my mom was officially over. He said they had agreed to sell their shared house and split the proceeds evenly, each receiving $400,000. What didn't surprise me was that Mom gave all of her share to Hudson, so he could pay off the remaining $300,000 on the house he'd bought on credit but couldn't afford. Not wanting me to feel overlooked or unfairly treated, Dad transferred his entire $400,000 share directly into my bank account. Seeing that amount in my account stirred something profound in me. It wasn't about the money but the love and trust he placed in me. But I didn't use that money for myself. A week later, I bought a home in the suburbs of Riverside for just under $400,000. A small 3-bedroom house with a spacious yard. We decided to rent it out to create passive income. It was a long-term investment and a thoughtful plan. One day, when I have a family of my own, and if Dad prefers not to live with us to avoid feeling like a burden, he'll always have a place to return to. I wanted to ensure he'd always have something solid to lean on, the same way he stood by me. As for my mother and Hudson, a month after my parents' divorce was finalized, the criminal trial for perjury and defamation took place. The verdict shocked many. My mother was sentenced to 3 years of probation, meaning she wouldn't serve time in prison, but would be closely monitored and prohibited from committing any further offenses during that period. If she violated any conditions, she would have to serve the whole sentence in prison. Hudson received a harsher punishment, 3 years of prison and 200 hours of community service. But the harshest blow for him wasn't the jail sentence. The court awarded full custody of Jose and Peter to Camilla. Due to his criminal actions, Hudson officially lost all parental rights. Seeing the sentences handed down, I didn't feel vindicated or satisfied. All I felt was deep sadness. An entire family had fallen apart, stemming from greed and blind favoritism. My mother and Hudson had brought this on themselves, but their price was steep, not just in terms of the law but in the irreversible breakdown of family bonds. 2 years have passed since all of that happened. Life for us has become much more stable now. My dad still lives with me in our house in Riverside. He's fully adjusted to his new life and has become an excellent companion. Every morning we still share coffee and talk about work. He's found peace again and often tells me he has no regrets about his choices. As for my mom, she lives alone now. We no longer keep in touch. Hudson may be getting out of prison early for good behavior. I don't know what he plans to do once he's released, but I hope he's learned something from his past mistakes. Camilla often brings Jose and Peter to visit on weekends. I'm grateful the kids can still feel a sense of family, even under challenging circumstances. And me, I'm in a relationship now. Her name is Paisley, and she is a 28-year-old who works in marketing. We met through a mutual friend during a coffee outing in Santa Monica. Paisley listens and understands, something that impressed my dad. Life now is mainly peaceful, though I still get harsh words from relatives occasionally. They say I was cruel for letting my brother go to jail, that I destroyed the family over money. But what about you? After hearing my story, what do you think of me? If you were in my position, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear others think. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the story if it resonated with you. Thanks for listening. See you in the following story.